Number 5. The story of Edgar Mitchell. Edgar Mitchell is a storied man. He's part of an incredibly exclusive club out of 12 other people who can claim that they have seen the Earth standing on the surface of the moon. I assume they all have a group chat together. He's best known for typing 80 lines of code to save the Apollo 14 mission as it descended to the moon in 1971. He was the 6th man to ever walk on the moon, and he is a devout believer in aliens being out there. He insists that he knows that top government and military officials were hiding the truth behind aliens in New Mexico. He said it was a known secret that alien spacecraft were responsible for disabling nuclear missiles and shooting them down, supposing that aliens are directly involved in intervention to prevent us from destroying the planet. Which, if that's the case, I've got nothing but thanks to give for our extraterrestrial friends. Thanks for that. We're not that responsible. He goes on to insist that the Roswell incident was real, and the government had covered it up and buried it as a conspiracy theory to deter people from finding out the real truth, which he believes NASA thinks the public simply wouldn't be able to handle. In 2004, he told a Floridan newspaper that he knew of a secret cabal inside the American government that was responsible for studying alien bodies, and that after JFK, this group no longer answered to the president and didn't include the commander-in-chief in their briefings. Mr. Mitchell is quoted as saying, "They all know that UFOs are real. The question is, where are they coming from?" Now, NASA didn't quite have the same tune. NASA themselves obviously denied all of Mitchell's statements, saying that Edgar Mitchell is a great American, but we don't share his opinions on this issue. Well, of course. If you've been sitting on a secret for 60 years, you're not gonna fold over one guy, but a bunch of evidence? Well, maybe. My goblins, you know what time it is. If you've been digging the scares, stick around and subscribe for some scary stuff every single day. Okay, let's creep on. Number 4. Luis Elizondo. Luis Elizondo is one of the most outspoken believers in aliens and UAPs out there today, alongside Tom DeLonge, championing that he believes firmly that NASA and the Pentagon aren't telling us all the whole truth. And he would know, as Elizondo formerly led a research team to research potential UFOs. Although the project was disbanded, Elizondo never gave up his mission, believing it to be his personal calling to expose the truth. He's been quoted many times saying, "My personal belief is there's very compelling evidence that we are not alone." He served on the Department of Defense and resigned in 2012 over excessive secrecy surrounding the UAP program. These aircraft, we'll call them aircraft, are displaying characteristics that are not currently within the US inventory, nor in any foreign inventory that we are aware of, Elizondo said of the objects they researched in his time there. He added that the program was founded to analyze unexplained aerial phenomena and ascertain whether or not that what they were seeing is a threat to national security or not. Kind of unnervingly, when asked about that, he said, "We found a lot. We identified anomalous aircraft that are seemingly defying the laws of aerodynamics." Which, oh hey, coming from the mouth of someone who worked at the Pentagon, that seems just a little bit suspicious, right? Right? Not just me? The quote continues, "Things that don't have any obvious flight surfaces, any obvious forms of propulsion, and maneuvering in ways that include extreme maneuverability beyond, I would submit, the healthy G-forces of a human or anything biological." Elizondo's gone so far in the past as to suggest that he thinks the US government has fragments of UFOs or UAPs somewhere, reverse engineering it to learn all their secrets. Sounds extremely like someone higher up didn't want people finding out about whatever Elizondo was getting onto. And why not? Number 3. The signal. Now, when it comes to aliens, we all kind of assume in the back of our heads that our first direct contact with them is going to be very up close and personal. That they'll come down and hopefully we'll see them face to face or face to mandible, or perhaps we'll see their ships descending on us and it's already too late. But what if our first contact was something else? A radar signal, a noise through the silence of space. In 2003, astronomers working for the SETI, short for the Search for Extra Intelligence, a project dedicated to hunting for extraterrestrial life, were using a massive telescope to look to the stars. Now, nothing much came of it except for a series of unexplained radio signals from the skies. These signals all disappeared over time except one, which was growing stronger and stronger. The signal comes from somewhere between the constellation of Pisces and Aries, and curiously, the signal is at a frequency that absorbs and emits energy. Naturally, the researchers found this a bit interesting. Some of the astronomers believe that this could be a frequency that extraterrestrials are using to try and get our attention, like an intergalactic "you up" text. While it could very well have turned out to just be totally nothing or some sort of natural explanation that I'm not nearly smart enough to understand, I'm gonna err on the side of extraterrestrials. But we have to wonder what the signal was, right? I mean, we have to admit that's a bit suspicious, that there's something worth looking into there. Now, this story is from 2003 and I had trouble finding an update on it. But who knows? Whatever was broadcasting that could still be out there. Number 2, Blue Book. Now, I think we all kind of secretly suspect that some of our tax dollars are going to research aliens. I mean, what else are they doing all day? Well, in one form or another, government agencies have always been researching UFOs and UAPs. Since 1949 to 1969, Project Blue Book was the code name for a secret government research division dedicated to analyzing UAP technology, analyzing whether or not UAPs on record were threats to air and national securities, and just what any of this stuff in the sky was. It was basically the closest thing we had to a real-life X-Files department, as far as we know. I mean, there could be an even more secret one. Surely with all that government money, they must have found something special, right? Well, if you'd like to feel like Agent Mulder yourself, you can scroll through 130,000 pages of declassified documents from UFO specialist John Greenwald, who made it all available for free online. He's a defender of free information. Greenwald says secrets are not bad things. I think we should know about this and it should be in the history books. John, I completely agree. All this stuff about cover-ups, we can totally handle finding out aliens are real, okay? You know, we're big now, we're responsible, we learned about Santa, we can do this. A couple years ago, we experienced a wave where there were clowns hanging out on the street corner of like every rural street in North America. We got over that. We all saw Tiger King together. Aliens won't even be that weird, I don't think. Now, Project Blue Book was officially disbanded because according to a joint review, nothing significant ever came from it. Now, since then, it was thought that no government agency was looking into UAP research at all, except until the UAP document quietly dropped this year, you know, sneaking it under the door that NASA and the Air Force had been researching aliens and possible sightings this whole time under everybody's nose, and they leaked a bunch of documents and footage, and you should look it up after this video because I'm not joking, it's totally real. It seems just like us, NASA can't rest until they find the truth out there. Number 1, new developments. We are probably coming to one of the most exciting times in UAP history, as after the UAP report came out, there is probably more legitimacy towards the discussion around the serious existence of extraterrestrial life now more than ever. As of October 2022, NASA is pretty much coming clean and opening a new study into the research of UAP and extraterrestrial life. 16 hand-picked specialists have been selected to analyze former data and determine how to go forward observing future events. Now, the study is less focused on whether or not previous sightings are confirmed UAPs, since it's kind of hard to ascertain with missing data. So it's more focused on what observations will be needed to understand UAP sightings going forward. The team is going to include researchers and key personnel from all divisions, all walks of life, notably including former astronaut Scott Kelly, who formerly served as a pilot for the Space Shuttle Discovery, and also once held the world record for most days in space, so he probably knows a thing or two about objects floating in the stars. Now, Kelly himself doesn't personally believe aliens have been to Earth yet, saying, "I think there's life in the universe. Hopefully intelligent life, but I don't think they visit planet Earth." So there's some skeptics on the team, but hey, at least they're finally coming out to get to brass tacks on this thing. Officially, openly, the government is talking with us about studying this phenomena. This is amazing. Now, you know how scientists are. They gotta have some numbers on a paper before they'll believe it. An associate administrator at NASA, Thomas Zerbchin, said, "Data is the language of scientists and makes the unexplainable explainable. Exploring the unknown of space and the atmosphere is at the heart of who we are at NASA. This is maybe the most exciting time in history to be a UAP fan." Number 5, the Allagash abduction. Our first tale is known as the Allagash abduction. And by the way, what a turn of a phrase. That sounds like a great airplane book. Named after the Allagash waterway in Maine where it took place, in 1976, a group of 4 friends who'd all met in college were taking a trip camping, canoeing, and relaxing. The trip would be a trip they would never forget, and not just because of the salmon. The men, twin brothers Jack and Jim, and friends Chuck and Charlie, all decided to go out fishing on the lake at night. Before setting off though, they made sure to light a large campfire to act as a visible landmark from the water. Now the evening transpired fairly normally, fishing, sharing stories, until the men saw a blinding light in the sky above them. A glowing orb that shone brighter than any light any of the men had ever seen, flashing all sorts of bright, radiant colors. Now the object was hard to make out, but it looked to be about 80 meters in diameter, and was slowly approaching the fishing boat. The men hurriedly panicked and paddled back to the shoreline, only to discover that the campfire they had been lit had been completely smoldered and looked to have been put out hours and hours ago, despite the men having not been out nearly that long. Stranger still, a few days after the trip, the men all started reporting similar nightmares, seeing a silver operating room and long, tall, giant-headed creatures examining them in this room, taking samples of their blood, their skin, and so on. All of them described the room, the creatures, and the nightmares extremely similarly. The men underwent psychiatric evaluation and were all deemed mentally stable, even passing polygraph tests. So what happened? Could this have been a mass hallucination? Or were these men plucked by visitors from another world for study? And if you love UFO stories and alien abduction stories, we've got plenty more where that came from at Top 5 Scary. So toss a subscribe and keep on creeping on. Number 4, the mysterious man. Our next story comes to us from the internet's campfire, Reddit. A thread was posted asking abductees, or people who've got an abduction story to share their experience. Now the whole thing is really a highlight, but this one stood out for me. Take a listen, because this anonymous Redditor shared a truly unforgettable, strange experience. He was living in Washington at the time, and he and his friends were really big stargazers. One Thanksgiving, he got invited to stay with his friend's family. So they all went out to go do some stargazing, went out to a big field of knee-high grass, and were staring up at what they thought was a bunch of shooting stars. The original poster asked his friend what the light was, but he said he had no idea. The light was bobbing around, bouncing wildly in the sky like a pinball. Then all of a sudden, it fizzled out. Puzzled, but not disturbed, the friends continued on with their night, walking through the field, wondering what they'd seen, even joking that maybe it was a UFO, but assuming it must have been a drone or something. And then it gets weird. They came across a young man standing alone in the field. They were the only people there for miles around, and the poster said he would have been able to see him from where he was. So he said it was almost as if he appeared in front of them. He was wearing only ratty jeans and nothing else. It was the middle of November, so the attire was particularly odd. Now the friends were scared to approach him, but OP felt necessary to go forward. He said he didn't sound drunk, but that he did seem visibly stirred. He asked the strange man what had happened, and he said he did not want to talk about it, but he needed to be examined at a hospital immediately. The Redditor gave the man his jacket and saw him into an ambulance, where he was then taken off to a hospital. What happened? Was this man an abductee who'd been dropped off? Was the light they saw flooding around him being beamed down? We may never know. Number 3, the 1979 Spain sighting. Another Reddit thread asking a similar question asked users to share their stories of famous UFO and alien sightings from their country, bringing us this story from Spain that took place in November 1979. A plane took off from Mallorca, coming from Austria and heading to Tenerife. Not long after, it found red lights in the sky hovering ahead of it. Now, initially the pilots assumed it was just another plane. The flight crew tried to signal over the radio to find out what was on their flight path, but neither the air traffic controller in Barcelona nor the military radar had any idea what it was they had encountered, as nothing else should have been sharing the airspace with them at this time. The plane ascended, hoping to avoid the flight path of the UFO, and to try and get a look to ascertain just what they were flying up with. The UFO kept getting closer and closer, so the pilots did an emergency landing in Valencia. The UFO had a similar idea and followed them around till it landed. The original plane's radar started to pick up 3 objects flying behind them. The military had sent out 2 planes to try and assess and contain the situation. They found a giant red light floating statically over the airport, even though it wasn't being picked up on by the radar. The light started to fly when they got closer as they attempted to chase it, soaring around, tailing the mysterious floating light for upwards of 2 hours, intermittently losing sight of the target completely, occasionally getting blips on the radar, until eventually the trail went cold, and as quickly as it had appeared, the strange light had disappeared. People on the ground reported seeing that light all over that day, and to date, no one truly knows what had happened. Number 2. The Travis Walton incident. Now, our next story is a wild one even by top 5 standards, but that's exactly why I wanted to include it. Our story starts in November 1975, and I'm pretty sure that's the third one of these that took place in November. It's a weird month for aliens, huh? Travis Walton was working as a forester, and the day was passing normally. Walton and his co-workers from the logging crew were riding in a truck, 7 men total, when they encountered a flying saucer-like object hovering above them around 100 feet in the air, making a loud, high-pitched droning noise. The truck stopped, and Walton left the vehicle to get a closer look at the unidentified flying object. And suddenly, a bright light surrounded the truck and knocked Walton back and unconscious. Terrified, the other men drove off. Walton then goes on to claim that when he awoke, he was no longer in the forest on the ground, but was in a bright, silvery, hospital-like room being observed by 3 short, bald creatures, very similar to the Allagash abduction story. He says that he struggled as much as he could against his captors until he was met with a tall creature that closely resembled a human, but was wearing an intimidating helmet. The masked creature escorted Walton to another room and put a translucent mask over his face, and he blacked out. Walton says the next thing he can accurately remember is walking alongside a highway 5 days later. The thing is, Walton really was missing for 5 days. There was a search. Scent dogs and helicopters were used to track him over the woods, and he was assumed to have passed. For 5 full days, he was completely untraceable until one day he just reappeared. Since that fateful week in 1975, Travis has sworn that what happened to him was an abduction, even if it just seemed like a bad dream. His story served as the basis for the 90s horror film Fire Fell from the Sky, so if you're looking for a dramatization of this story, good one to check out. And number 1, the Rendlesham incident. It's sometimes referred to as Great Britain's Roswell. The Rendlesham incident is a very noticeable case in UFO sighting history. On December 26, 1980, there was a series of vivid, bright, flashing lights flying over Rendlesham Forest in Suffolk, England. 2 U.S. Army personnel, John Burroughs and Jim Penniston, were stationed at local Air Force bases and were alerted by these strange lights, worrying that it could have been a threat. The younger of the 2 men, Mr. Burroughs, said that the lights looked like a beacon flashing all sorts of colors. Over 40 personnel stationed at the Air Force base corroborated this claim. The 2 men got clearance to investigate whatever was flashing over Rendlesham Forest. In their official document to their superiors, the 2 men write that they saw a strange, glowing, metallic triangular object hanging in the sky, pulsing with colored lights. Neither of the men had any idea what it was they were witnessing. The craft seemed far more advanced than anything either of them had ever seen, and seemed not of this world. As if that wasn't compelling evidence enough, neighboring farm animals were all in a frenzy as this thing was flying, and the airmen's equipment started malfunctioning. The personnel could no longer use their radio to contact the base. Landing in the middle of the clearing in the forest was a craft unlike either of them had ever seen. It was black, triangular, and made out of smooth, opaque glass. No windows or landing gear. It didn't look like anything either of these trained servicemen had ever seen. Penniston describes there being hieroglyphic-like symbols etched onto the shell of the vessel, although they were far too cryptic for him to understand. The craft took off, changing the lives of those men together. And it wouldn't even be the last sighting of the Rendlesham UFO, because not even 2 days later, the same strange lights were seen flying overhead the forest again. This time, coming prepared, crews set out with Geiger counters to follow up on whatever was flying around them. The patrol found their way to the landing site Penniston and Burroughs had described and found several depressions in the ground, all setting off the Geiger counter for radioactivity. And lo and behold, above them was those same flashing lights that had been taunting them 2 nights before, disappearing into the skies. 40 years later, and we're still no closer to understanding what happened in the Rendlesham incident.
Number 5. Mars. The goal of the Mars exploration program is, quote, to explore Mars and to provide a continuous flow of scientific information and discovery through a carefully selected series of robot orbiters, landers, and mobile laboratories interconnected by a high bandwidth Mars-Earth communications network. Okay, yeah, that's great and all, but like, are you selecting which pictures you share with us? Cause we'd love to see what the planet looks like. In 4K, please. I know I would. I think it's funny that we can see an infrared cloud into the vast distances of space with the new Webb telescope, yet 4K pictures, still none of the other side of the moon. Huh, that's weird. I mean, it's a lot closer if we wanted to start there, you know? But Mars is great too. We've all seen the pictures of right angles and impossibly formed canyons and craters from Perseverance to get an idea of what exactly the red planet looks like. Yeah, it's red. And sandy, like PEI sand. But we're starting to see some weirder and weirder stuff from NASA as it collects scientific information up there. Like, say, this potential crash landing site. I mean, if it was a crater, bigger hole. If it was an asteroid, bigger hole. Nope, just this thing that looks exactly like what it'd look like if you whipped a rock into sand. Just kind of skips and you know? This would happen. Buzz Lightyear to Star Command, we've crash landed on a strange planet. I don't know, I'm not saying this stuff's covered up or anything, but like, I feel like if we have the equivalent of a bad garage door security camera, you know? Doing like a long 345-degree shots and only showing us more sand. This thing could be in the Gobi Desert for all we know, we'd never know the difference. Show us the bases, where's the monoliths? Also, one lens? One lens? Like, where's the X-ray, the infrared, radio waves? Let's go, people. We've all played No Man's Sky. Where's the 4K and the jetpacks, dude? Number 4, Paul Hellyer. Okay, now on to some more scary stuff. Hey, also, if you dig the channel, make sure you like and subscribe, or comment down below. Do you think they're releasing this late report to Congress or what? Just kinda hoping everyone forgets it's due and just moves on? Anyway. Flying on up to Canada, who's been involved in UFOs for a very, very long time. The RAF and RCMP have been on top of this stuff. I'd say even before the Americans. Paul Theodore Hellyer, August 1923 to August 2021. First off, rest in paradise, sir. This man has done more for us up north than we'll ever know. This man has and will play a huge role in the UAP phenomenon as a whole. I encourage you all to look into Paul here a little bit deeper. An engineer, a politician, writer, commentator. He was the longest serving member of the Queen's Privy Council for Canada. In 1967, Hellyer inaugurated a UAP landing site in St. Paul, Alberta. The town built it as a Canadian Centennial Celebration project, as a symbol of keeping space free from human warfare. In 2005, Hellyer made headlines by publicly announcing that he was a true believer in the existence and was an invited speaker at the conference in Toronto where he shared that he had seen a UFO during his career. In 2007, Paul was demanding world governments to disclose alien tech that could be used to solve problems of climate change. Hey, that's pretty cool. In an interview in 2014, Hellyer said that at least 4 species of aliens have been visiting Earth for the last 1,000 years, with most of them passing by from another star system, and of course, those living with us on Earth from Venus, Mars, and Saturn's moons. Awesome. Just for some credentials here, Paul ran for the federal election like 12 times. Yeah, Air Force, Navy, former Minister of National Defense. Guy was 98, people. Do some homework. He's easily the highest ranked true tinfoil hatter we know of. 98 years that man graced our planet. I wonder what he knew. Number 3, government. Speaking of disclosure and how we're all kind of right in the middle of it, right now, we go to Congress. It's odd because we obviously joke and have a good time and make light of the whole situation, but like, whether you like it or not, it's happening. First off, I'm scared. I'll admit it, I'm scared. I scared my stuff into this stuff. I discovered John Greenwald in like the 9th grade and it's been rabbit holes ever since. Let me tell you. When Congress starts talking about other planets and aliens, it starts mocking up some public citizen hearings with ex-Congress members. It's starting to get a little scary. But these public hearings, they whipped this bad boy out. The cream of the crop UFO video that they say they have. The portrait mode, the 4 seconds of a circular something. Like, that's it? Apparently it's taken from the cockpit of a US fighter jet. May 17th, 2022, members of the United States House Intelligence Subcommittee on Counterterrorism, Counterintelligence, and Counter-Proliferation held Congress hearings with top military officials to discuss the reports of UAPs. Did you miss it? Yeah, it was at 9 a.m. on a Tuesday. Yeah, really important stuff. Also, how come they put like the grainy 90s filter on the video? Dude, like we make videos here, we're not gonna notice that? This thing's grainier than the first episode of The Golden Girls. The first public Congress hearing in over 50 years, and this is it. Again, there's some mock citizen hearings that were way more convincing and way more informative from way more reliable personnel. Also, better quality. Interesting, huh? But again, why wasn't all this shared when it originally happened? The government says, yeah, there's like 14 things we can't explain, yet try and solve the easy ones. Apparently there's like 144 more classified videos to just rummage through. It's been a big month, I will say that. 16 candidates for the new UAP NASA program, report late from Halloween, weather balloons, airborne clutter, foreign surveillance. What are they going to tell us this week? Number 2, Dave Foley. And we come to yet another great Canadian, Mr. Dave Foley. Those of you who aren't familiar with the North and what we produce up here, Dave is a Canadian actor, comedian, director, producer, and writer. He created Kids in the Hall, a Canadian gem, and also an avid believer in the phenomenon. He took to Twitter a couple months ago and caught the attention of many. Foley tweeted, quote, "After years of interest in the UFOs without ever seeing anything, I saw something. This is a drawing of what I saw. I was with a friend who I'll let decide if he wants to be attached to this. It moved silently, at great speed, hovered and pulsated with light." End quote. Now this ship does look a lot like what we've seen in the past reports, so who knows, Dave may actually have seen a UFO. Maybe these aliens are just fans of A Bug's Life. Guys flick, man. Maybe they just want an autograph, I know I would. He continues online, quote, "Many people who have encountered the phenomenon are afraid to discuss it because of the thoughtless and uninformed derision it inspires. Many who discuss it have had their lives ruined by that derision." I should point out, the white lights were on the front of the craft, assuming it was moving forward, and those lights pulsated separately from the body of the craft, which also pulsated. We felt like our emotions were being tamped down. We were unnaturally unresponsive to what we were seeing. In a way, I'm still experiencing that. End quote. Hey, it's all fun and games when the celebs get involved, isn't it? But up here, Canada's been involved for a long time. More publicly, too. Just last week, a report said that Canadians were briefed last year on what's what with the phenomenon. A document released a couple days ago say the February briefings were delivered by multiple members of the Pentagon UAP task force, and attending was 10 Canadian defense officials, including the Royal Canadian Air Force and military intelligence. Right? Like, not just comedians and sketches, you know? These people have been around a while and read some stuff. Paul Hellyer type stuff. And number 1, Tom DeLonge. Come on, this is an easy one. And probably the most confusing yet reliable source of them all? I know, trust me. Blink-182. "Hey mom, there's something in the back room." Well, there actually could be. Remember enjoying their song Aliens Exist before believing that aliens actually exist? Yeah, the lyrics hit a bit different now, don't they? Cut to 2017, former Blink member Tom DeLonge, now the co-founder of To the Stars Academy of Arts and Science. Sounds fun, right? Until you see the panel. Military generals, astrophysicists, psychologists that have been studying this stuff since the 50s. It's the real deal. But how can a rock star be the head of this phenomenon? Well, he's into aliens, and that's an understatement. Susan Gao, the Pentagon spokesperson who made the public statements on disclosure, said that the Navy had confirmed that those 3 videos that are so wide in circulation are authentic recordings made by naval aviators. And guess who got all those out to us? Quote, "Everyone still looks to the United States government as having all the resources. We've been waiting around as scholars and researchers for many decades, hoping God that one day the government would come to us on what this is. This whole thing could be answered by the government. We're just waiting for them to come help us out with some of the research. This situation that happened is what we've been hoping it would do, so it can ignite more intellectuals to get into this race and help us figure out more about it." End quote. I couldn't agree with you more, Tom. Physicists, astronauts, that's who we want to hear from, you know? And just for dessert, here's what Tom posted on his Instagram. You tell me what's up.